Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Mental Wellness Lounge. I'm Brandon Johnson, and I'm so excited to have another guest on to talk about their organization and some of the work that they're doing. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce Kiesha Jackson to the lounge. It's so great to have you on, and so I want to move out the way and give you some time to introduce yourself to the lounge.
So, Brandon, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm excited about, the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, this sacred space that you have created just to learn all things mental health as it relates to Blacks. So I am Kiesha Jackson. I'm the founder and executive director of Caleb's Kids. Caleb's Kids is a nonprofit that I started about 5 years ago. I started it in 2016, so about 4.5 years ago. After I lost my younger brother, Caleb, to suicide. Caleb passed away. He was 22 years of age, 4 days before his 23rd birthday. His passing left a huge void in my life, a huge void in my heart. And I really devoted my life to all things mental health after he passed away. In doing so, realized how big of an issue that suicide was for our young people, but also how our young people don't really receive the tools to learn about mental health, but also the tools to learn coping and get help whenever they need the help. So I created Caleb's Kids, and so we do a lot of work in the community around overall mental wellness. So, mental health education, suicide prevention. We teach youth about coping skills. We practice coping skills and really provide youth with the tools to overcome and work through whatever challenge life may throw at them. So, thank you, Brandon, for having me.
No, that's awesome, and thank you for your work and taking what I'm sure was a really really challenging and difficult situation, and turning that into a passion. Like I know that had to be a lot. And before we get into more work about Caleb's kids, I know that that's a thing that we don't talk about that a lot, like in the Black community. Like we're starting to talk about mental health and mental wellness, and it looks a lot like just do yoga and all this stuff, and like you'll be good. Um, but there is that experience of being a loss survivor and having lived experience, and what that means for us. And since we're not talking about it, there's not a lot of healing spaces for it.
Mhm.
So could you talk a little bit, as much as you're comfortable with, about that experience and how important it is for Black people with lived experience to connect and to how to work through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because when I started Caleb's Kids, the initial focus was for the survivors of suicide loss. So the family members, friends, the children that are left behind after a loved one elect to end their lives. And the issue became that, okay, the issue isn't that it's happening. The issue that it is that we need to prevent it from happening. But in starting off the organization from that lens of being that help and being that support for family was very important to me. When you experience this type of loss, it just doesn't impact that person. It just doesn't impact that immediate circle. It impacts so many others. So you think about households where you may go from a two family income household to now a one family income household. If there's children involved, all of the help the children will need from a therapy perspective, mentorship perspective, and just overall resources to help them, piece together that void that's left to still be able to live and thrive in their lives. And then you have help that is needed for if there are any parents surviving from their child that ended their lives. So it's so complex, and being able to have a space where survivors can come and heal and voice their thoughts, because it's very difficult to think of. A lot of times when I speak with people, they talk to me and they commend me for my courage in talking about it because they have experienced the same type of loss and still maybe processing it. I know someone who experienced the loss of a sibling about 8 years ago. And in meeting me, he was able to process those thoughts and how it felt. For me, my journey in processing it was starting Caleb's Kids. Like after Caleb passed away, I knew immediately that I wanted to prevent other families from experiencing this type of pain, other youth from experiencing the type of pain that would lead them to want to end their lives. So my path was clear. It was my personal mission to do that, and the strength came to be able to move forward in that. And it has been extremely therapeutic for me starting this organization and really being able to impact and change the lives of those around me.
That's awesome. That is really awesome for you to be able to kind of know exactly what to do. I think for people who haven't had that lived experience, one of the things that people ask me a lot, like knowing that I work in suicide prevention, is like, "Well, what do we do? Like, what's helpful? Like, what should we, be doing?" And in your experience, like, how can people help and support without, um, kind of being more harmful in that situation? So, how can others support, and what advice would you give?
Yeah, language and framing of conversation and framing of the words we choose to describe suicide, the words we choose to describe mental distress, is very important. So, ensuring that we're using that neutral language that doesn't add to the negative stigma around it. So, not using words of mental health concerns to describe moods and feelings. I mean, you don't refer to anyone else by their illness. You don't refer to someone and say, "Hey, you're a diabetes." Like, no, like they have this illness that's completely separate than them as a being. So why is it okay for you to say the weather is being bipolar? Or why is it okay for you to say, "Oh, they're just depressed and stuck in their room, they're selfish"? Like, no, like separate what how we talk about mental health concerns and stop shining that negative light on it. So, language and words is key when talking to someone who has experienced this type of loss. But also, in addition to that, there are a lot of resources out there on the internet to really help you how to have that conversation with someone, and also knowing where their comfort level is. For me, I can talk about it all day, every day, because it is something that I have used to be empowered and to really turn that tragedy into triumph. But others, it may not be easy for them to talk to. I have members of my family that still can't talk about it to this day, and that is okay. Everyone's journey in recovery and getting over this is different. And when I say getting over it, is not that you don't discount that it's happened, but you have to figure out ways to accept what the new norm is, and then figure out ways to operate in that new norm and still be the person that you were before this happened.
That's great advice and things for us to think about and be, critical in that space. We use mental health words so freely, nowadays, and we really need to think about like the impact that that has on people. And so I want to shift and go into your work with Caleb's kids. First of all, um, thank you as someone who's in this work and who works in suicide prevention. It's I mean, it's so great to find out about you and your organization and what you guys have been doing, and particularly work with younger people. And so so you're centered in Detroit. I'm from Baltimore, grew up in Baltimore. And our kids, like, I find them to be like sister cities, like Detroit and
Mhm.
Baltimore. And our kids go through a lot of things, a lot of different, issues and challenges that they're dealing with right now. And so, from your perspective and the work that you're doing in Detroit, what are some of the things that you've been seeing and hearing from our kids that they're experiencing right
Yeah, and it's so interesting because prior to 2020, the normal things that I would hear from youth is, I'm depressed because I have a lot of responsibilities at school, or I may have anxiety because of those same responsibilities at school, or I'm sad because I see my mom sad, or I see my other family member that's in the household sad, or I just really don't know my place in the world. But as 2020 has kind of expanded the mental distress that so many young people are in, a lot of times what I've been hearing from young people now is anxiety and worry about the future. So, what does school look like for me long term? Am I really learning? Am I going to be able to get the job that I desire? If there's going to be those types of things that's going to impact me. Another thing that we're hearing is the worry about the future from a living perspective. Is something going to happen to me to where I am no longer living? So we saw a lot of that with the George Floyd situation and the police brutality, where, you know, our youth can seemingly walk down the street and something bad can happen to them at the hands of someone who is supposed to protect them. So a lot of uncertainty and fear around that. And then just the grief from loss of life. Of course, we have had a lot of youth who have experienced loss of life, from family members of friends who have passed away during COVID, but also just that grief from loss of being and loss of activity and loss of being able to socialize and connect with their friends. So we're seeing a lot of the anxiety, the depression, the worry, the uncertainty, all of that kind of wrapped into everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, that's such a that's such an important thing for us to talk about too, because at this stage of their lives, like when you're a younger person, the thing that you're thinking about is, as you're looking and seeing experiences, is how does this connect to me? Like what do I see? Like where does this come in, for me? And I think, especially with the youth that, I've seen them and talking to, like they've resonated a lot with Breonna Taylor and thinking through that situation of just like, I mean, nothing happening, nothing going on, not in the wrong place at the wrong, like just not doing anything. This is what happened, and there's no justice, and that comes with such a weight. And so it's, great to have you articulate that part of our youth. And as they are experiencing these things, even before COVID, a lot of them feel ignored. They feel like we're not listening to them and that they're not being heard. And so as a part of that, like we're watching these things happen, right? Like we're watching suicidal ideation, and attempts and deaths go up in our kids. And depression is really at a all-time high with our black girls, like that are adolescents. And so, as they're dealing with this, how can we better support, from your perspective and the things that you all have been doing, how can we better support our kids and make sure that they feel heard and, be protective of them in this season?
You know, one of the things that youth have always shared with me is that they just want someone to listen to them. So, the first thing that we can do, especially as adults in general, but also as adults in this space, is listen to our youth. They just want an environment where they could talk freely, vent freely without one, the judgment, but without two, someone telling them that they shouldn't have these thoughts or that they shouldn't be feeling this way or that they're not old enough to experience certain things, or well, they don't have responsibility, so why are they feeling a certain way? So one is listening and creating that environment where, youth can be vulnerable. The second thing is providing youth with the educational tools to learn about their body, learn about their thoughts, learn about what's going on. So giving them the tools to be able to identify that, something isn't right. I may look fine. I may think that everything is right, but deep down inside, something isn't right because normally I would do this. And for the last 2 weeks, I have been doing opposite. So helping them recognize what those things are that's going on in their lives that may be impacting them negatively. Also creating an environment where we can help you recognize triggers. And every day isn't going to be great. Your day will have ups and downs, and that's really a part of life. But helping you realize, like, what are those triggers and things that's going on that causes those down moments to be consistent and pervasive for a long period of time. And then the fourth thing that we can do is just providing them with the resources to help work through those challenges. I always tell my youth, like, you need to feel whatever you're going to feel. You have to feel your emotions in order to work through your emotions and heal through those emotions. So giving them the tools to be able to work through whatever is going on. And even if what they're using as tools to work through it, if it's not working for them, having the courage to take that next level. And that may include getting professional help for whatever is going on.
Yeah, that's so critical. It's so many adults walking around that don't know their triggers, and don't know some of those things that I don't know why I do what I do in this situation. And the more we can help our kids identify that is great. And so I love your answers there. And so I want to shift a bit. Like there's so much. that our kids hear about, what they don't do right, how different they are from other generations, which happens literally to every generation, right? Like they're compared to the other generation and they're like, you're different. But that's what's supposed to happen, right? But there's so many strengths and assets in our kids. Um, First, like what are some of those characteristics that you see in our kids? Like what are their, what's unique to this generation that gives them their strength? And two, how do we as adults help them see it because they can't always recognize it?
Yeah, and what's so interesting about that is I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who's a therapist, and it's around framing. So when you hear the news every day, you see how things are impacting Blacks only. So, COVID, we have the highest amount of cases. Poverty, we have the highest amount of people in poverty. Like all of the negative stuff that's out there seems like it impacts us the most. So, how do you report what's going on in life in general without ostracizing us to make us feel that we're less than? And so when I think about our youth, they're on social media all day, every day. They're watching TV every day. So they're constantly getting these negative messages of how things are negatively impacting Black people and how they're negatively impacting Black youth. So one of the things that I see with youth that really lends to their resilience is they are extremely courageous. They call out injustice, call out wrongdoing, really like no other generation. They are really tasked with knowing what is right and wrong and ensuring that they are protecting what is right and speaking out against what is wrong. So having that boldness and courage just to confront the norm will take them far in life, but also having that same boldness and courage to confront their thoughts and to confront what they're feeling inside will also take them far in life. Like when we look at mental health, it literally is the foundation of everything that we do. You can't have any success in life if you're not taking care of your head. You can't learn algebra, you can't learn geometry, you can't learn entrepreneurship, you can't learn how to balance a budget without having your brain in line. So our youth, like they have this courage, they have this boldness, but they have to ensure that they take that courage and boldness to the next level and challenge the thoughts that they're having in their mind and challenge their feelings and demand help. Demand that, research in mental health expands to the Black community. Demand that they have equal rights when it comes to this mental health space so that they can continue to excel and evolve and be the best person that they can be long term.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and they are, and they have this unlimited access to knowledge, right? Like they know how to find whatever they want. Like, my son is 8 and he's in school and he has completely learned now that there is a voice button on Google. So literally as he's doing whatever he needs to do, all out here is, how do you spell such and such or what is such and such? And so he has access to that. And so like as he's learning stuff and seeing things on TV, and especially, I've mentioned this I think on another interview, but during the NBA season, I mean, when they switched, the court was Black Lives Matter, like every commercial, like they talked through it and had conversations during the game, and that's where we bond. I mean, we talked through so much. Like he, took in a lot, and so, our kids are definitely at the forefront right now of this movement, and it's so critical for us to to help them take care of their mental health and wellness. And so, is there anything else about Caleb's kids that you want to share with people? Anything about your organization, and also how can people connect with you all in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so with Caleb's kids, I'm just grateful that, I was given the opportunity to have Caleb's kids and given the insight to be able to create this organization because it's so needed. We think about like the gaps that we have in education. We always say, well, back in the day, we had this in school and they don't have it in school for kids anymore. Or back in the day, we had that. And so we think about those things that we may have had back in the day. So, like home ec, or, financial classes that taught you how to balance checkbooks, or just the other things that we had where those were like the basics and building blocks to help you have a life, to where kids aren't getting that in school now. And so creating Caleb's Kids really um, is a vessel of love, but also a vessel of love that really bridges that gap to where, we don't have the mental health education in school. And this is what we all have mental health. So being able to bridge that gap is very rewarding to me. Being able to impact the youth that we serve daily is very rewarding to me. But also, when I hear you tell me that, oh, I was struggling with, my thoughts the other day, and I thought about something that we learned in class, and now, I was able to work through that. Or, hey, do you have a number to a therapist that you think will be good for me? Because I need to talk to somebody else about my thoughts. Those are the things that make the work that we do like even more important. But also having platforms like this to talk about mental health and talk about our work is very critical to our success. So if anyone is interested in connecting with us further, you can visit our website. It's Caleb's Kids, so CALEBSKIDS.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, constantly posting about just things going on in the community, but also posting tips and tools for overall wellness and mental health.
Keisha, it's been an honor to have you on. I'm so glad that we connected. Looking forward to collaborating in the future. But thank you again for the work that you're doing, the work of your organization, and for really taking again something that I know was difficult and creating this passion project. I like to call it, that you're working on. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. No problem. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll be back soon.